April 8, 1943, 27,000 feet above Caen, France. Oberleutnant Ralph Hermiken's oxygen mask couldn't hide his smirk. Through the crystal-clear canopy of his Focke-Wulf N190A5, he watched awkward silhouettes clawing their way toward his formation. "Die Amerikaner have sent us flying milk bottles," he laughed to his wingman. Below them, 16 brand-new P-47C Thunderbolts of the U.S. 4th Fighter Group lumbered upward in tight formation, their 2,000-horsepower Pratt & Whitney R-2800 engines straining to lift nearly 7 tons of metal into the sky. To German pilots used to sleek Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters, the massive barrel-shaped Thunderbolts looked like a joke. Fat fuselages, tiny wings, and propellers larger than anything in the Luftwaffe. But what Hermiken didn't know, what no German pilot circling above them could have imagined, was that they were witnessing the arrival of the weapon that would systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. Within 18 months, those flying milk bottles would become instruments of terror. The sound of their .850 caliber Browning machine guns would be burned into the memories of every German pilot who survived long enough to hear them. The math of destruction was already in the wings. 3,400 rounds of ammunition, a combined rate of fire over 6,000 rounds per minute. Enough firepower to cut a Focke-Wulf in half in 2 seconds. A new kind of fighter arrives. The transformation began that April morning when Major Donald Blakesley of the 335th Fighter Squadron spotted German fighters positioning for attack. Blakesley, a former RAF Spitfire ace, instantly understood what his new pilots did not. To survive in a P-47, they had to abandon everything they thought they knew about dogfighting. The P-47 wasn't built to turn tightly or climb gracefully like the Bf-109 or FW-190. It was something new entirely, a high-altitude battering ram. American designers hadn't chased elegance or finesse. They built a machine around 3 principles: power, altitude, and overwhelming firepower. Among the 56 Thunderbolt pilots in the sky that day were future legends, men who would become top American aces. But on April 8th, they were rookies in an untested machine, facing veterans of Poland, France, Britain, and Russia. The Luftwaffe had been fighting since 1939. The Americans, 0 combat days. This is the story of how industrial logic crushed tactical brilliance, how American quantity and quality merged into unstoppable force, and how German laughter turned to shock when they discovered what synchronized .50 caliber Brownings could do at 400 yards. The monster that wasn't supposed to fly. The P-47 began in June 1940 as a panic response to German domination over Europe. Alexander Kartveli, Republic Aviation's chief designer, was ordered to create a high-altitude interceptor. He warned his team, "It will be a dinosaur, but a dinosaur with good proportions." The first XP-47B prototype that flew in May 1941 stunned observers. At nearly 10,000 pounds empty, it was 65% heavier than its predecessor. The massive turbo supercharger piping running through its tail gave it a swollen, almost comical look. Test pilots had one question: does this thing actually fly? It did more than fly. At altitude, it ruled. The R-2800 Double Wasp delivered full power at 27,000 feet, an altitude where German engines gasped for air. The turbo supercharger fed the engine's sea-level pressure in the stratosphere, giving the P-47 unmatched power where it mattered most. Deadly to train in, deadlier in combat. Major Hubert Hub Zemke of the 56th Fighter Group initially despised the aircraft. Between September 1942 and January 1943, his unit lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft, all in training. The P-47 killed more Americans in training than Germans would in early combat. But the men who mastered it discovered something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, future 27 Victory ace, wrote, "Flying it was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. You didn't fly it, you aimed it." Early combat seemed to validate German arrogance. The P-47 couldn't turn with FW-190s or climb with Bf-109s. Luftwaffe pilots mocked it as clumsy, slow, and hopeless. Losses were high. 14 Thunderbolts lost in the first month for only 3 confirmed kills. British Spitfire pilots joked the P-47's best evasive maneuver was to unstrap and run around inside the cockpit. But something important was happening, and German intelligence missed it. P-47s were taking absurd punishment and still flying home. One returned with 21 cannon hits and over 100 machine gun strikes, a level of damage that would have shattered a Messerschmitt. And when the Thunderbolt's guns connected, the results were horrifying. German fighters didn't just fall, they exploded. The day everything changed. June 26, 1943. That day, Second Lieutenant Robert Johnson's life and the Luftwaffe's perception of the Thunderbolt changed forever. Returning from escort duty, Johnson's 48-plane formation was ambushed by 16 FW-190s. Johnson's aircraft was riddled with fire, 21 cannon shells, over 100 machine gun hits, canopy shattered, controls damaged, engine cowling torn away, a fire behind the instrument panel, Johnson wounded and trapped inside. He tried to bail out, but the canopy track had fused shut. Somehow he kept the crippled wreck flying toward England. Then a lone FW-190 attacked him repeatedly, emptying all its cannon and machine gun ammunition. Johnson's Thunderbolt refused to die. When the German pilot pulled alongside, he stared in disbelief. He shook his head, saluted, and peeled off, out of ammo. Johnson landed safely at Manston. His crew chief stopped counting bullet holes after 200. The story spread through both air forces like wildfire. German pilots stopped laughing, learning the Thunderbolt's true strength. By July 1943, American pilots discovered the secret. Don't turn, don't climb at low altitude, dive, hit, climb, repeat. The P-47's enormous weight turned into a superpower. In a dive, nothing on Earth could catch it. Thunderbolts could hit 550 miles, then convert that speed into a zoom climb no German fighter could follow. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin perfected the boom and zoom strategy. Thunderbolts would climb to 30,000 feet, wait, then dive onto German fighters like falling anvils. Survivors described their firepower as a wall of lead. Aircraft hit in that convergence zone didn't go down, they disintegrated. August 17, 1943, the first true Thunderbolt massacre. During the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid, P-47 stunned Luftwaffe bomber-destroyer units. Major David Schilling's flight dove into a formation of heavily armed Bf-110s. A German gunner later said, "The P-47 didn't even wobble when our shells hit it. Then it fired, and our aircraft simply came apart." 8 German aircraft were obliterated in less than a minute. Altitude. The Luftwaffe's nightmare German aircraft performance collapsed above 25,000 feet. The P-47's performance improved. On October 8, 1943, legendary German ace Hannes Philipp, 206 victories, was killed by P-47s while his FW-190 struggled in thin air. Germany realized the ugly truth. The Thunderbolt owned the stratosphere. The paddle blade prop arrives. In January 1944, the P-47 D-22 introduced the huge paddle blade propeller. Climb rate jumped from 2,100 to 3,000 feet per minute, matching German fighters. Germans quickly noticed. A veteran FW-190 pilot wrote, "The fat American fighters have learned to climb. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year." The new prop also changed the Thunderbolt's sound, a deep, terrifying roar. German troops nicknamed Donnerschlag, Thunderclap. D-Day, total air domination. On June 6, 1944, More than 500 P-47s covered the beaches. German pilots attempting to reach Normandy were slaughtered. One of the few survivors reported, "The sky belonged to the Americans. We tried to break through. 12 took off. I was the only one who returned." The Thunderbolt becomes the Luftwaffe's worst nightmare. In the weeks after D-Day, P-47s destroyed 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 armored vehicles, 4,153 horse-drawn vehicles. Daytime movement became suicide for German ground forces. P-47s carrying bombs and rockets could level entire convoys. German troops described them as flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers. The Pacific, a whole new terror. Japanese ace Saburo Sakai wrote, "We called them monsters. Our cannon shells had no effect. Their return fire tore aircraft apart." The long-range P-47N escorted B-29s to Japan, proving the Thunderbolt was no longer short-legged. The P-47 versus jets. The Me-262 should have been untouchable, but P-47s caught jets during takeoff, landing, and in high-speed dives. On November 27, 1944, Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meyer shot down a Me-262 by diving from 28,000 feet. Jets were fast. Thunderbolts were faster in a dive and far better armed. Operation Bodenplatte, the final proof. January 1, 1945, Germany's last great air offensive. Nearly 900 German fighters hit Allied bases. At one P-47 field, a German pilot taunted an American officer as 22 Thunderbolts burned. The officer pointed to the runway and said, "By tomorrow we'll have 40 new ones. How long to replace your pilots?" Within 48 hours, the Thunderbolts were replaced. Germany never recovered. The numbers that broke the Luftwaffe: 15,683 P-47s built, one completed every hour at peak U.S. training, 30,000 pilots per year. German training by 1945, pilots with under 100 total flight hours. Thunderbolt achievements: Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in air-to-air combat, 3,015 aircraft destroyed on the ground, 86,000 railcars, 9,000 locomotives, 6,000 armored vehicles, 68,000 trucks, Pacific 697 aircraft in air combat, countless ships, barges, and vehicles. The P-47 achieved a 4.6.1 kill ratio, with the lowest loss rate of any Allied fighter bomber. The Luftwaffe's final verdict captured German documents show the progression perfectly. April 1943, minimal threat. December 1943, significant threat. June 1944, critical threat. March 1945, unsurvivable in direct engagement. Adolf Galland later admitted, "We laughed at the Thunderbolt. We stopped laughing when we understood it was built around American industry. It climbed like it was falling upward. Those 8 guns. Roosevelt's piano. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it." Final words. The plane Germany never learned to fear in time. At the U.S. Air Force Museum, a sign sits below a strip of gun camera film showing a FW-190 vaporizing under P-47 fire. It quotes a German pilot. "We laughed when we first saw them, fat, ugly fighters. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you, and you ceased to exist." The P-47 entered combat as a joke. It ended the war as the destroyer of the Luftwaffe. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken, and the sky belonged to America.